Break time is over. It's CL. Y'all know what time? Them other guys ain't got no style. We know what's up before we go down. This is the rundown. This is the rundown. If you ain't know the deal, I bet you know now. This is the fans' voice. You hear them vocab. This what the people need and what they want now. This is the rundown. This is the rundown. If you ain't know the deal, I bet you know now. This is the rundown. This is the rundown. This is the rundown. And if you ain't know the deal, I bet you know now. Yeah. Turn up. What's happening? What's going down, people? It's your homie CL, and I'm back live on the Rundown Sports. Gotta know that. And I'd like to thank y'all for joining me, however y'all joining me. And today, got a special guest. I have Sekou Smith from NBA.com's Hangtime Blog and Podcast. He does that show with Lane Whitaker and Rick Fox. Good dude. Stay right out here in Atlanta. So, even though we was on Skype, we was damn near 10 minutes from each other all day. But before we get into that, basically, this is the start of a new podcast under the Rundown Sports umbrella. Not sure exactly what it's going to be called quite yet, but just know you can always find it at therundown.com. It'll definitely be on iTunes, probably have some new art, new logo, new everything. So y'all stay tuned for that. And y'all just get used to some of these interviews, kind of get into some of the intricacies that we don't never get to discuss too much when we just talking X's and O's. This will be more of a sports entertainment podcast. So we're going to have a mix of, of course, sports, music, and not just hip hop. We might go a little bit outside and see what else we can pull in. Definitely want to talk movies, television, books, the whole nine, man. I really want to get everybody involved with what I'm trying to do with the Rundown. So I'm not going to hold this podcast up. Sekou was very gracious with his time, and so gracious I had to go ahead and split the podcast up into two parts. So I'll catch y'all on the other side on part 2. Y'all enjoy my chat with Sekou Smith. What's going on, people? It's your homie CL, back live on the Rundown Sports. And got a very special guest, probably my most legit guest out of everybody that I've had on the podcast. From NBA.com's Hangtime Blog and Podcast, I have Sekou Smith. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm just fine. I'm a little excited. I'm trying to kind of hold it in and maintain my composure.
Nah, man, it's all good. I'm glad to join you, man. And two of my favorite interests, coincide with two of yours, obviously, in sports and hip hop. So it's a good to get a chance to talk to you.
Okay, well, I might have to sneak a few hip hop questions in and kind of find out your taste about it.
Yeah, I'm old school now. I got teenagers and they know all the latest songs, and I'm still stuck in the mid '90s, man. I'm an Outkast cat, so I'm like in a 1990s time warp. So take it easy on me.
Okay, well, screw it then. I'm just asking about that right now. You say you're an Outkast fan in like early '90s. What's your favorite Outkast CD?
I love all of them, obviously. I like songs as much as I like CDs. I like all of Outkast's early stuff. It's kind of like the soundtrack of my college years. You know what I'm saying? Okay. But one of the songs that people don't really, that's kind of off the radar, that I still play when I jump in my truck today, man, is from the New Jersey Drive soundtrack, Benz or Beamer, which is one of my all-time favorite beats and songs that I've ever heard, man. It's just, to me, it's quintessential, Outkast, and it bumps now like it did back in the day. And I like to see people's eyes light up when they get in my truck and hear it. And they're like, "What song is that?" And I'm like, "Come on, man, you gotta do your homework. You know,
Yeah.
you gotta know. Can't just rock albums. You gotta rock tracks. You gotta know everything that your favorite artist did in order to really get a full appreciation for 'em."
Right, and that kind of defines what a true fan is. You know what I'm saying? And because if you just when the single come out, you jump on it. You know, you just a spectator. It's just kind of like these bandwagon fans when they come to these NBA teams.
Yeah, you gotta do your homework, man. And listen, the internet has made this pursuit of whatever your specific topic is. You like an explorer now, man. You can go back and study stuff that you would have taken hours and hours to do when I was a young person. So, like I said, I got teenagers, and you know, I took my daughter to the Chris Brown, Tiger, and Trey Songz
Uh
concert, man,
oh.
and she knew every word of every song until they brought Keith Sweat out, and then she turned to me and said, "Dad, who was that?" And I was like, "What? Who is that?" I'm like, "Oh, So you get educated, and then you got to do some educating when it comes to music, whether it's popular music or stuff the kids think is old school or not. I was surprised to realize that Keith Sweat is considered old school now. It made me feel old.
And it's like, that I'm kind of the exception to the rule because I'm such an audiophile, me being into music so much. Um, what's considered old school to a lot of people, I just consider that's music from a while ago.
Right.
And I'm very familiar with Keith Sweat. I even go back to a lot of those New Jack Swing records around that time period as like some of my favorite music to kind of like get me in the mood to clean my house.
Yeah, man, that's the music of my youth, man. I mean, I remember when NWA, first dropped, and me and my buddies rode around, and somebody was like, I think it was in somebody's mom's Bonneville, flipping the cassette over and over, riding around town just so we could learn the lyrics. Like we had to learn every word to every song immediately. We burned up a lot of gas riding around my hometown listening to NWA when they first came out because it was groundbreaking stuff. And I go back further than that, obviously. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm 42 years old. I remember hip hop in its infancy. It's been the one common thread for my generation since we were little kids is growing up with hip hop. But there are seminal moments, and like I said, when I was a teenager, NWA coming out was it was groundbreaking. It was earth shattering for us because we had never heard anything so clever, so absolutely just diabolical in
Just in your
its
face.
reach, impact. Yeah, it came at you so hard, and I was like, man, we could not get enough of it. We had to learn every line, and believe me, we did. Riding around that summer, we every single word.
Okay. Well, you kind of dated yourself when you did bring up that cassette tape. But let's talk about where you from. You are from Grand Rapids, Michigan, right?
Yeah, man, born and raised, and from a long line of folks who have roots in the South. Obviously, my dad is born and raised for a few years in Tupelo, Mississippi. I left there as a young boy, um, and found his way to Grand Rapids, Michigan. By the time he was in high school and graduated from there, and um, my mom, who's passed on, is also grew up in high and went to high school in my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I'm the fourth of five kids, and proud to be born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, that's what's up, man. Cause I'm from Saginaw. I wasn't born and raised there, but I claim it because my whole family is from there. So
Mm.
I've been there so much, I might as well have grew up there. We call Grand Rapids Big Rapids whenever it's time to go there. Um, Now, tell me something, maybe like on your upbringing that kind of like sent you down the path that you're on now.
Yeah, man. Listen, my introduction into this business didn't come until college in terms of the professional side of it. But sometimes when you're young, you don't realize you're preparing yourself for a certain path at that time. My brother, who's 4 years older than me, who actually lives here in Smyrna, in Metro Atlanta. When we were kids, he was the guy who drew the pictures. He's a very gifted artist. He could draw, he could sketch and color, players in their uniform based on what we looked at in a magazine to a T. Like he could do it
Oh
down to
wow.
the most specific detail. So he sketched the players, and I would write and make up stories about them, and we collaborate and kind of do that as a form of entertainment. We didn't, like I said, we didn't have Xbox, so we had to entertain ourselves. We had to come up with ways to indulge our sports Jones in ways that coincided with the time. So we did that. We took a wooden board and turned it into a court, and he drew the court for Michigan State because Magic Johnson was our favorite player. It was 45 minutes away.
Mm,
My home, you know, East Lansing is a nowhere drive from Grand Rapids. So
right.
we created our own players. He would sketch an entire team, and we do it on just regular old white paper and colored in with colored pencils. And then we take the whole team, put them in, wrap them up in a rubber band and put them in the shoebox. And
Hmm.
we take teams out and play imaginary games and announce them. And I would sit there and write short stories about it, 2, 3 paragraphs about whatever the game was, and it's basically modeled after what we read in the newspapers that my dad would have down on our kitchen table all the time. So that's, and that was when I was 7, 8 years old. And
Oh,
it grew from there, but only in the respect that I wrote a lot when I was young, and I had a very creative imagination about sports and you know how to use it as a form of expression. And it wasn't until I got to college and went to Jackson State that I actually got introduced to the business of journalism, and that's my first year in school there is where I really got baptized into this business and really understood what it was about.
okay. Well, trying to figure out which way I want to go with that, but uh, now have you been back to Grand Rapids recently?
Yeah, I was there in February, I think it was. No, January, late January, before NBA All Star Weekend. I went up. My dad and I went up for a few days to visit some people and see some family, and just popped in, flew in for a quick visit to check on some folks. He's getting up there in age, and he got to make the rounds, make sure everybody's doing well, and I want to make sure they get a chance to see him. So we went up there, and two of my sisters, my older sisters, still live there. So we always get to go back and see family. Got to see one of my great nieces, was born the weekend we were there. So it turned out well. It was a good trip home. I only make it home a few times throughout the course of the year. I'm usually smarter than that. I don't go when the snow is on the ground, but sometimes I tricked into going while there was snow on the ground this year. But yeah, man, I still have an affinity for my hometown, and I love to go and kind of go back, turn the clock back a little bit, and go see people there because I haven't lived there in 20 years. I mean, it's been a long time since I actually called my hometown, my quote unquote hometown in terms of living there and being there on a regular basis.
Okay, because I'm really concerned, just like from a social standpoint, of the state of Michigan, like no pun intended, but the state of it, and like I know at least in Saginaw and even parts of Detroit, it just it almost looks third world country like in some parts. So I don't know what's gonna happen soon, but I'm just hoping that things can kind of just start getting built back up in that part of the country.
Yeah, I mean the Midwest and the Rust Belt took a beating with the recession, obviously, and Michigan took it as hard as anybody with the auto industry and certainly other industries, taking a dip. But I'm proud of the people who were up there, man. Fighting that good fight and trying to make sure they get it back on track. The technology in my hometown, the medical industry, the tech industry is booming right now.
Mm.
University system um, at Michigan State has got a medical school in Grand Rapids, so it's allowed for some growth that might not have been there otherwise. And but I agree with you. It's one of those things where you see a vibrant community, man. I know my history about my state and certainly Detroit and some of these places where at one time the population was through the roof with people, hardworking folks enjoying the fruits of their labors in terms of you can make a good living working at an auto plant and
Mm-hmm.
or any subsidiary of one of those plants, and that era has changed. That time has come and gone, and it's a different beast now. So it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
transition and change for the people up there, and people got to figure out a way to roll with it.
Most definitely, man. Shout out to the whole Dirty Glove, 313 Detroit podcast, um, and shout out to my boy Jalen Rose, who also shouted out my boy Draymond Green from the SAG. So good looking out on all y'all. Now I want to talk about, you say you went to Jackson State. That's in Alabama, right?
Mississippi, Jackson,
Mississippi. Oh
Mississippi.
yeah, I'm thinking about the other one. All right. So you say you went there for journalism, and then I'm guessing did you get to the AJC right from there?
No, I went to Jackson, for college, and I studied, and while I was there, I was studying. I also worked at the Clarion Ledger, which is the largest daily newspaper in Mississippi. So from my second year of school on, I worked at the paper and finished up my books and stayed there and worked at the Clarion Ledger after graduation for a few years, and then I went to the Indianapolis Star and worked there for 5 years, and then I came to the from Indianapolis to the AJC in 2005. So I had some other stops in between. I also interned in some places. I lived in Cleveland, in Poughkeepsie, New York, and made the rounds a little bit before I made my way here to Atlanta.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the ATL. I want to talk about the Hawks a little bit,
Hmm.
um, and then I also want to ask you a little bit about your current job too. Um, now you came in. You said 2005. That's that whole Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, um, well, I guess experiment that kind of just landed the Hawks in, I guess, forever mediocrity. I said, around 2008, 2009, they're not going to get any farther, blow it up. Um, but I don't really want to talk X's and O's. I kind of want to talk more about what it was like to cover the Hawks. I just recently heard um, a podcast on True Hoop TV
Hmm.
with Marcus Thompson, who currently is the beat writer for the Warriors, and he said he referred to you when y'all were both in the locker room at the same time as the Hawks calling y'all the hip hop sports reporters because they had two brothers in the locker room at the same time. Uh, so like how have things changed since then, and kind of like tell me a little bit about that time period.
Yeah, I missed that. Mark's is one of my good friends over the years here, in the business, obviously, and doing a fantastic job out of the Bay Area. Um, so I got to go back and listen to that. But man, it's a strange dynamic. There was a time early in my career when you cover a team that's trying to rise up the ranks and get out of the lottery mix every year, and those guys you mentioned, Josh Smith, Josh Childress, Joe Johnson, all those guys, I don't associate them with mediocrity so much. I associate them as the guys who kind of dug the Hawks out of that hole, out of that stretch of a decade where they weren't in the playoffs. They got them into the playoffs and into a streak that's going, working on 8 years now, which is the longest in the Eastern Conference, second longest in the league behind San Antonio. Um, so I have a different perspective on those guys. I happen to look at them as the guys who helped the Hawks turn the corner. And yeah, it's when you're a young black male covering the NBA, you walk into a locker room with a calling card that you can use in a positive way or not. You got to go in there and be a professional, and make sure you take serious the obligation to be a historian. Of this thing. I've always felt working in newspapers and obviously in the digital world now that you're not just up there writing or talking about this stuff. You have to be responsible with what you say, how you say it, and be respectful of the fact that this is going to be stuff that's a part of recorded history for not only yourself but for these players, these organizations, in the general public. So that's where the tenets of what we learn in school about journalism to me become extremely important. The accuracy, the accountability, and the general understanding of how to do this job and do it properly.
Okay. Now, out of that whole era, out of the Josh Smith and all those guys, like who enjoyed Atlanta the most? Because the A is notorious for its gentleman establishments and very vibrant nightlife. Um, even Dominique, said that he had a club at one time where he used to be the best host for opposing players, and basically he could see the fatigue on their faces the next day. Um, so like out of that camp, who kind of like loved Atlanta the most?
You think I mean, are you asking out of the players on that Hawks team?
Yeah.
Uh, well, I think it was different for Josh Smith. It's unique, being from here.
Oh
Um,
yes.
I think there was some inherent pressures on him that the other guys didn't have to deal with, and that might have, curbed his enthusiasm to enjoy his hometown as an adult and as a young man the way he really could someplace else. Because when you get away from home, obviously, you're not bound by the restrictions of, hey, everybody knows your name, your story, your history. Um, you may run into people that even in a city this this size, a metropolitan area, this magnitude, 6 million people, whatever it is now. There's some familiarity there with the public and yourself that doesn't allow you the freedoms that a guy like, say, Marvin Williams, who comes all the way from Seattle, goes to North Carolina and comes here, or Josh Childers, who comes all the way from LA, goes to Stanford, comes to the Atlanta and the Hawks. Um, I would say that this is a city and a situation tailor made for a lot of those guys, but nobody uh, more so than Marvin Williams. And he was the guy, obviously, who was drafted a couple years later into that era, that Billy Knight era, when Billy was running the franchise. And this was a chance for Marvin to experience a city that's completely different from Seattle. My best friend is from Seattle and is the assistant bull at Rainier Beach High School, where Jamal Crawford, Nate Robinson, a lot of guys who have played in the NBA are from. And I've been out there and spent expensive time in this is culturally, it's a world away from Atlanta. So to see Marvin Williams come here as a teenager, basically, he's 19 years old, 20 years old, when he got his toes wet in this town, was really interesting and intriguing because it was culture shock and a shell shocking of for a guy who really, at his age and with his temperament, was not maybe ready for what Atlanta can do to you at that age, at that stage of your life. So it was, but I think all of those guys enjoyed it tremendously, man. This Atlanta to me gets a bad rap as being a bad sports town and front running fans. It's front running fans everywhere. Fans all over the country who only want to come out when their team is rolling. But there are a lot of people here who live and die with the Hawks and with these sports teams around Atlanta. And I've lived here long enough to know the difference between true diehard fans and fair weather fans. And there are plenty of both here, just like there are everywhere else.
All right, that was part one of our chat with Sekou Smith from NBA.com's Hangtime Blog and Podcast. Still had a lot more to say about the Hawks and pretty much just the NBA in general. So y'all stay tuned for part two. I'm out here. Peace.